I think it was one of the most personal and touching welcome address I have ever received. And if at all there is a place where I will receive such a personal address, I think definitely it has to be Amrita. So this is more like a second home for me. So I think if I take account of the number of PhD evaluations or the presentations that I have attended, first one will definitely be my parent institution, which is KUSAR. But after that, I have attended the maximum number of presentations, evaluations, as well as guidance, mentoring to the students that I have done for Amrita. So yeah, it's definitely a second home for me. So I think I'm visiting the campus actually, I think after 2.5 years. So first time I'm visiting the campus after the COVID pandemic. Prior to that, I was a regular here for evaluating the MPhil presentations and the PhD qualifying examinations. Post COVID, also, I was actively involved in it, but it was all happening through the online mode. So it really feels nice to be back here in the campus and to be in front of here, all of you, to take a session on qualitative research. Yeah, so first let me start with a disclaimer. I'm also a beginner in the area of qualitative research. It's only since the last 4 or 5 years I have started to explore qualitative research. In my PhD, also, it was mostly a quantitative research that I have done for my PhD. There was a small element of qualitative element that was involved there, but predominantly it was a quantitative work. So I'm also a beginner like all of you, and I'm also starting the presentation with the assumption, the session with the assumption that you are all experts in quantitative research. So that's what Bala sir and Prashant sir also told me. Now the students have all become experts in quantitative research. They know everything about it. So right now they want to have a different focus. So maybe they need to be introduced to something different. So why not let us tell them about qualitative research? So in my session also, I'll be asking you questions so that you can let me know what do you think about qualitative research, or how do you think qualitative research is going to be different from the quantitative research aspect. So that's why I said I'm starting with the assumption you are all experts in quantitative research. I think you have done, all of you have completed your coursework, right? The PhD students, all of you have done your coursework. So wherein you would have definitely had a paper on research methodology, wherein would have been exposed to various forms of methodology, wherein majority of the focus would have been on quantitative research. Yeah. So we'll start with qualitative research. So this is I think the very first session that I'm going to offer on qualitative research. I have been considering qualitative research as a methodology since the last 4 or 5 years, but this is the first time I'm going to offer a session on qualitative research. So it's going to be a learning experience for me as well. And for the, I think there are a lot of people who have joined as online participants. So for the information for them, I think one document is already shared with them, which we'll be using as an exercise towards the end of this session. So for the offline participants, that exercise will be distributed maybe towards, like, as we are reaching towards the analysis of the qualitative research part. Yeah. So without any further ado, I think we can start with the session. So, is there anyone here who has attempted to do a qualitative research? It could be at a very small level, small scale, that anyone who has ever attempted to do qualitative research, either as part of your UG project or postgraduate program, or maybe in your MPhil, PhD, at any stage? Anyone who has attempted qualitative research? Nobody? It's surprising. So that means you have all done quantitative research as part of your all the project work or all the research that you have done. Okay, so then let me just rephrase the question. What all do you think will come under qualitative research? Examples for qualitative research methodology. So yeah, what do you think will come under qualitative research? Types of qualitative research. Or maybe I'll tell you what all will come under quantitative. So if somebody says I'm doing quantitative research, then the first
probably
thing
you
that
can
comes,
explain it with an example. The quantitative, qualitative.
Okay, if somebody says I'm doing a survey method,
I have the freedom to talk to her like that.
Is it a quantitative or qualitative study? Somebody is doing survey. Quantitative, that nobody has any confusion. So why do you think its survey method is an example for quantitative? You are getting numbers, right? So in survey, what are the usual form of questions? Yeah, on a Likert scale or a 5-point scale, mark your answers strongly disagree to, strongly agree, or very unlikely to, very likely, something like that. And we can give scores to each of this response category, which we can do all the mathematical calculation, find the measures of central tendency or measures of dispersion, and so on. So yes, definitely it's an example for quantitative research. Okay, what if somebody is saying, I'm going to do an experiment? I'm going to do an experiment with a control group and experimental group. I want to see the impact of yoga on stress management. So we are having an experimental group, a group of people who are undertaking yoga on a regular basis, and another group who is not undertaking yoga. So you have a control group and experimental group. Then after 6 months, you are trying to measure their, let's say, stress or maybe blood pressure, other physiological measures. Is this an example for a quantitative research or qualitative research?
Qualitative research.
Okay, I think the answer is from the online participant. Okay. Any response from the offline participants? Yeah. Call it just two options. Either you can say qualitative or quantitative. It's quantitative. Why quantitative? Because I specifically mentioned after 6 months period, you can measure their blood pressure or any other physiological measures or even stress. You can measure it either through physiological means or by giving them a questionnaire. So experiment is also an example for quantitative research. So I have already omitted like survey is now quantitative, experiment is now part of quantitative research. So what else is remaining? Yeah, interview is an example for qualitative research.
Qualitative,
Yes.
correct.
Then case study. Yeah, focus group discussion, which is a very popular mode of research that is not just as a research, I think even in industry, especially people who are working in the area of market research, before launching a product, it's a very commonly used practice to have something called focus group discussion. We'll deal more with it as we go further. Any other example for qualitative research from the visual media or the literature researchers? What else will come under qualitative research? Yeah, content analysis. That is actually a method of analysis that we can use in qualitative research. Yes, content analysis. Would anybody like to give any example for a content analysis where somewhere you have done content analysis? All of you are familiar with whatever is happening with Twitter, right? Right now, what is happening in and around Twitter? Have you are reading newspaper? Yeah, so recently there was a news that Elon Musk has taken the decision to bring Donald Trump's account back to Twitter. So what had happened to his account earlier? It was blocked. On what basis was it blocked? Based on the content of his post, content of the writing, whatever he was. I hope you are all familiar with the social media platform called Twitter, wherein we can all tweet. We can use language as a medium to express our opinions or share information. So Donald Trump is just one example. Like him, there were several other people who were blocked by Twitter as a social media platform because of the content of the tweets that they were using in this particular platform. So here, what do you understand by content? What do you think would have been wrong with the content of all these people who were blocked? Yeah, it could be. It could have been abusive language. Yes. Yeah, violence. Yes. Then louder. Hate speech. Yes. So here, are we using any quantity here, or all the answers that you gave me, violence, hate speech, then abusive language, have we used any quantity here? No. We have all used certain characteristics or attributes of the language that was used by these people to express their opinions in a social media platform. So this is an example for qualitative research wherein content of what people express in a social media platform can be evaluated. Same way, I'm sure there are a lot of research which is done in the area of Facebook or any other social media platform. Content analysis is a very common form of research, especially in the area of, I think people who are working in the area of visual media and social media, they might be familiar with this form of researches where you can do content analysis or thematic analysis. We'll again much later towards the session, we'll explain more in detail about what is content and what is thematic analysis. So this is just to give you a brief idea about what all will come under qualitative research. So I have got three answers. I think interview, focus group discussion or FGD as we usually say, case studies. Anything else? Yeah. Historical research, yes. Historical data, using historical data, yes. Then observation is a very powerful method that actually comes under qualitative research. You just don't do anything else, just go and observe the people who are involved in a certain activity. It could be either participant or non-participant observation. Again, we'll discuss. I have some interesting examples for that as well. We'll see that. So yes, observation is also a very common form of qualitative research. Then anything else is there? Okay, so let me just share my PPT. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with this particular story wherein 5 or 6 blind people went to see an elephant and how they described the elephant depending upon which part of the elephant they were touching or perceiving and did it. So this is the problem many times with the quantitative research. In quantitative research, we start with the hypothesis, right? I think that's the pressing issue for most of the research scholars. What should be my research problem and how do I frame my research hypothesis? But your hypothesis might be, or many times you are forced to scope your hypothesis in such a way that it is very limited in its focus. Your hypothesis say either there is difference between these two groups on the aspect of this variable, or you say there is a relationship between these two variables. It is giving you only very limited perception or insight about the problem in hand. So many times the end results or the outcomes will be like how blind people went and went and experienced an elephant. It may not be a holistic picture. It is very difficult to get a comprehensive picture. So qualitative research helps us to get a comprehensive picture or a holistic idea about a particular research problem rather than narrowing down or restricting our hypothesis to one specific angle. So ideally, I would say, if at all it's possible, it is better to have a mixed methodology in your study, a combination of both qualitative and quantitative, which will give it both the empirical validity as well as the generalizability and also the robustness and in-depth insights into the problem at hand. So to the extent possible, I recommend all the research scholars to go for a mixed methodology. But since you are already familiar with quantitative research, I'm assuming you will definitely be making use of quantitative research as part of your research, especially for people who are in the area of social sciences. But along with it, if you can make use of qualitative research, that will definitely add more insight or more value to the work that you are doing. Your results will become much more acceptable and generalizable. Now, this is again the word from a practitioner. So Kristen Mansberg, he is actually an entrepreneur. So this is something which he has said. So usually whenever we talk about research, we say whatever research we do at the end of the day, it should have application in the real world scenario. It shouldn't be something that is just limited to publishing in papers or textbooks. So this is the words of a very famous practitioner who has explained the relevance of qualitative research. So according to him, it may be possible to predict a customer's next mouse click or purchase, but quantitative data will not be able to tell you why a person made that click or why a person made that purchase. So without that insight, companies cannot close the complexity gap. So if you're looking from a business perspective, again, I'm coming from a management background. I'm teaching in a management school. So all my examples will be always be very close to, or most of my examples will be coming from that sector. So excuse me for that. So if you maybe, I think all of you are familiar with purchasing from making purchases from e-commerce sites, right? Like Amazon or Mindra or any site for that matter. So from a Mindra owner or an Amazon manager, they are more interested in knowing what makes a customer to choose a particular product over the other product, or why they are buying a particular product from Amazon and not from Flipkart, rather than knowing about how many purchases have been made on a particular day for the long term survival or long term sustainability of the organization. So just to further expand the same point, you can see one single research problem. So if you are using a quantitative method, that will give you numbers. Only 1 in 30 took the free ice cream. So somebody is serving free ice creams, offering free ice creams, but only 1 in 30 took the free ice cream. That's an interesting research problem. Even though it was free, why only one person took the ice cream? So if you're going for a quantitative approach, you would have just got the number. But for a researcher, it is much more interesting to know what is exactly the reason, or what did the people feel when they were offered the ice cream. So if you are going for a qualitative method, you can actually ask the question, what did you feel when you saw the free ice cream? Imagine this particular ice cream drive was done in front of a school for school kids. So why did the school children didn't accept the free ice cream? Maybe they were scared. Maybe they would have heard all the stories from their parents about the potential kidnappers who will come and offer chocolate and free ice creams. So that could have been the reason why they didn't accept the free ice cream. So there could be a lot of reasons for that. So for a researcher, it is much more interesting to know why something happened, or what was the emotions that were experienced by a person when a particular stimulus was introduced in front of them, rather than just quantifying how many ice creams were sold or how many ice creams were offered. So just one single problem, you can approach the problem in two different perspectives. So we'll come to the basic question, what is qualitative research? So I'm interested to hear any of your answers. Don't worry about the standard textbook definition. Whatever that comes to your mind, you have listened to a couple of examples, you've seen few pictures. So based on that, what do you think is qualitative research? Any thoughts? Anything that comes to your mind? Any keywords? So what is qualitative research? If somebody asks you, okay, you are doing PhD in Amazon, okay, great. So can you just tell me what is meant by qualitative research? What will be your answer to that question?
Qualitative research find answers to the term why people do like that, or why people think like that. So that why factor is being inquired in the qualitative research.
Okay, yeah, that's a good answer. So your name?
Sridevi.
Sridevi, yeah. Thank you, Sridevi, for the answer. Yeah, so Sridevi has given us a response that qualitative research gives us answers to the why question. Why somebody attended a particular meeting? Why somebody was angry about a particular thing that happened? Why somebody is coming regularly late to the office? or why a mother spank the kid. There could be a lot of reasons. Do you think mothers spank their kids only when kids do something wrong? It not necessarily. There could be 100 reasons why a parent is scolding a kid. So why something is happening, that can be answered by qualitative research. Yes. Any other perspective? So for those of you who are interested to learn more about qualitative research, this is what I would call as the Bible for qualitative research. Qualitative research from start to finish by Robert K. Yin. I think the soft copy of the book is also freely available in Google. So those of you are interested can either download that, and I'm sure the library here will definitely be having a copy of this particular book. And I would personally recommend anyone who is planning to do a qualitative research to get a hard copy of the book, because whatever you want to know about qualitative research, right from defining your problem to analyzing and discussing your results, everything is detailed in this particular book by Robert K. Yin. So this is something that anybody who is interested in qualitative research should definitely read through. Okay, so what is qualitative research? I still haven't got the complete answer. So let me give you one more example. So you can just have a look at the slide. This tells about a research problem that was faced by researchers. So a group of researchers from University of Limerick worked in a village in South Sudan. They did a survey of villagers and asked them what were the most serious problem. The villagers said that one of the most serious problem was malaria. Researchers tested the blood of some of the villagers and found that malaria was very common. They gave people in the village bed nets soaked in insecticide and told them that using the nets would decrease malaria. People started using the nets. The research team tested the blood of the people after some time and found that there was a big reduction in malaria for those people who used the nets. So they felt the program was successful. So far, so good. Everything is going on as per the project, as per the research problem that was proposed by the researchers. They are happy. Their intervention has been found to be successful. Then let's see what happened. Later, after some time, again after let's say 6 months, some other researchers came to the village. They found the people no longer use the nets. The people just said it's not working. And they became even more skeptical of the outsiders and were less interested in cooperating in programs to reduce malaria. They said, you earlier came and gave us the net and said us if we use it, all our problems will be resolved, but that's not happening. So we are not happy. We don't want anybody from outside to come here and do all your research. So what do you think has gone wrong here? Or what are the possible reasons that the villagers are now saying the program was not successful? Because earlier, when they did the test, they had clear empirical evidence that the malaria has actually come down. The incidence rate of malaria has come down. Still, villagers are saying, no, we are not happy. It's not working. So, what do you think would have happened? What exactly is the issue here? You can use all your creativity. So it doesn't have to be the right answer. At least come up with some interesting answers. Okay, so maybe mosquitoes are biting during the daytime, not during the nighttime when they are sleeping inside the nets. Yes, that could be one possible answer. Yeah. Any other possible responses? Yeah. Okay, so some counterintuitive thing is happening. Something which was meant to reduce something had some after effect. Yes, that's also a possible answer. Okay, I'm happy that you come with two possible solutions. Yeah. So all of you should come up with some possible answers or not. Use all your research mind. So when you have such an issue, what do you think would have happened? It may not make any sense. That's okay. Research is like that. Any other possible response?
Ma'am, the effectiveness of that impregnated material has been reduced.
Effectiveness was not?
effectiveness of that material which has been used to impregnate that mosquito net has reduced.
Okay, effectiveness has reduced. Okay, what was your answer? Okay, maybe they didn't like why how somebody from outside their tribe is coming and telling them what to do and what not to do. Yeah, so it could be purely an attitude issue also. Like many times student doesn't like when something is told to them by their teacher. So just because of that, they might resist something, they might rebel against something. Yeah, everything is possible, right? So let's look at this example. What was the issue? Yeah, so the real reason was that there was a misunderstanding. So by malaria, the researchers meant an infection that is happening because of malaria parasite. But for the villagers, it meant any type of fever. It was not just what we called as malaria for them. Any fever that they experienced, they used to use the generic term malaria. Whatever it was, they used to call it as malaria. So after using the net, so even we sometimes we get fever which is not caused by mosquito. So even those fever they used to call it as malaria. So that was the issue. So although the number of malarial infections decreased, the total number of other types of fevers did not change much as far as the villagers were concerned. So they thought we had been fooled. They said if we use this net, all the fevers will come down. But see, just that maybe they didn't even realize that there are different forms of fever. According as far as they were concerned, earlier also they were having fever. Now also they are getting fever. So this is what is this reason, or what do you call it in research term? The issue that has just popped up before you, where there was a misunderstanding between what was understood by the respondents and what was understood, or how the term malaria was defined by the researcher. There was clearly a discrepancy, right? The researcher had something in mind and the respondents had something else in their mind. So how this kind of issues can be resolved?
Awareness, giving awareness.
Yeah, giving awareness, you need to talk to them, right? You need to talk to them. So they would have got this is the real reason only after interacting with the villagers, only after having an insightful conversation with them. Only after that, the researchers would have got this is the real reason why they felt this program was a failure. So, in this kind of situations where you want to know, as Sridevi was telling me earlier, this helps us to answer the why question. Why did this program fail? Why did the villagers say, even after using the net, our problem is not resolved? So, in order to understand that, you really need to get into the details. You need to have an in-depth understanding of the problem. If you just give them a questionnaire, is there any difference in the number of fevers that you are experiencing? They would have all given no as the response. So a quantitative survey would not have helped you. In this kind of situations, you need to get into qualitative research to understand why the villagers gave this kind of a response. What is the real reason behind it? This kind of information you would have never got through a quantitative survey. So I hope this example gave you further clarity on why we need to go for qualitative research and under what situations you need to go for qualitative research. So would anybody else like to add anything more to the definition of qualitative research? I'm hoping you're getting more and more clarity. So anything more? Okay, so I'll give you one more exercise. So look at all the research project listed below. 4 projects have been given. So can you just tell me for each project, will you be going for a quantitative or qualitative approach? And you can also let me know, like, why do you think for this particular study, quantitative is suitable or qualitative is suitable? So question number 1, a comparison of the effectiveness of drug A versus drug B in the treatment of migraine. So 2 medicines are checked for checked against the treatment of migraine. So for this study, will you be going for a quantitative research or qualitative? Yeah, it's definitely quantitative research. Second one, an exploration of the role of practice manager in the primary healthcare team, a study of 4 practices. Will this be quantitative or qualitative? Which do you think is more suitable? Study of 4 practices done by practice manager in a primary healthcare team. Yeah. Qualitative. Actually, this is something where you can do both. You can do both qualitative and quantitative. So maybe you can take it as a case study and take a qualitative approach. You can also go for a survey method to go for the quantitative method, or you can even go for a combination of both. Third one, an examination of young people's and parents' account of communication about cancer in childhood. This is definitely qualitative. This is a clear case of qualitative research wherein you are trying to understand the experience about young children and their parents when they were told that their kid is suffering from cancer. So you can also try to look at the speciality of the topic, the nature of the topic for which quantitative is suitable, and nature of the topic for which quantitative is more suitable. So here we are talking about kids who were afflicted with cancer, which is a very sensitive topic, right? It's a very sensitive topic, something which is very personal, something that will make the parents and the kids also very emotional. So for this kind of study, when your research topic is very sensitive, it is always better to go for a qualitative approach rather than giving them some impersonal survey. Now, let's look at the last one. I think it's very obvious, but still. A national survey of public's knowledge of nature and extent of abuse of older people. It's definitely quantitative. Yes, their survey is straight away written. Okay, so finally, I'll move on to the definition. But even before that, this is one paper which I have. In fact, this was my first ever paper, which was done based on qualitative research. So can you just have a look at the topic and let me know why do you think I have gone for a qualitative approach in this particular paper? I hope you all read through the topic, title. Yeah, I think
this is about human behavior.
Okay, yeah, it's about human behavior. Yes, then
The
more.
transgender itself is a very sensitive area.
Exactly. So transgender people means it's very sensitive. And that too, I was specifically looking at people who were working, transgender people who were working. So how many transgender people do you think who are actually working in like the so-called organizational structure? I'm not talking about freelance working here. People who are actually working in organizations who have identified themselves as transgenders, openly come out and declared, I'm belonging to the transgender community. How many people would have been there? My population was very, very limited. It was very difficult for me to get access to the people. Even if there were few people, to approach them, to get permission from them, to get data from them, it was a very, very difficult work for me. In fact, in this approach, I collected data from multiple stakeholders. I interviewed people who are transgenders and working in organizations. I also interviewed HR managers in companies where they have actually employed people belonging to transgender community. And I also had NGOs who are actually working on this particular course. So I've collected data from people from 3 different categories. But still, it was a very sensitive topic and my population was very, very limited. So I didn't have any other choice but to go for a qualitative research? Because if you're going for a quantitative method, which is like a survey or experiment, how much sample size you need for minimum in a survey? I think that's one part you are all struggling, right? What should be my ideal sample size? So to use any of the most accepted statistical methods, multivariate analysis, minimum you need how much sample size? What is your that number? Do you think I can collect data of 50 sample and carry out multiple regression or structural equation modeling? What do you think? With a 50 sample size, can I go for a structural equation modeling? Definitely not. So, in a survey research, the sample size is a key factor. Whereas in this particular case, for this particular research problem, I had a huge constraint in the form of sample size. And that was constraint number one. And second one was it was a very sensitive topic. So combining all these aspects, I decided to go for a qualitative approach for this particular study. And I think this is something which I did in 2018. So that was a time, I think, compared to 2018, now there are more people who have openly declared belonging to the LGBT community, and companies are also coming forward to include more diverse workforce. But way back in 2018, I think the data collection actually happened in 2017 end. So at that point of time, it was very difficult to even identify people belonging to this community and who are actually working. So your research problem will also tell you whether to go for qualitative or quantitative research. Who is your sample? What is your population size? Adopting which method will be more suitable from your sample's point of view? So all that will tell us as a researcher should we go for quantitative or qualitative research. Finally, I'm coming with the definition for qualitative research. So you can say that it's a form of social inquiry that focuses on the way people interpret and make sense of their experience and the world in which they live, and understand the social reality of individual groups and cultures. So this is the technical definition. But if you try to decipher this definition, you can understand that qualitative research is very contextual in nature. It's very context specific. In the earlier example which I gave, if you can recollect, for the people who were in the village of Sudan, it was very context. For people who were in that village in Sudan, malaria meant all forms of fever. The same thing if you are asked to somebody who is living in a village in Kerala, they wouldn't have had this confusion. For them, it is very clear what is malaria, what is dengue fever, or what is any other form of bird flu. They are very clear about it. Whereas in the earlier case, for people who were staying in a village in Sudan, for that particular context, in their particular society, in that culture, malaria had a different meaning. So quality research is something that helps us to understand and interpret the contextual background of a particular problem. Okay. Now, okay, are you all with me so far? Following whatever we are discussing? Okay, great. So this is again something which you all might be knowing. I am not planning to explain it in detail, but this is just for your reference. A comparison between qualitative and quantitative research. So as I said earlier, I'm assuming you're already familiar with quantitative. So the right side of the column, it's very easy for you to follow through. Left side of the column is talking more about how qualitative research is different from quantitative research. So the objective in quantitative research, as I mentioned earlier, we all start with a research problem and hypothesis to see if there is any relationship between two variables. Whereas in qualitative, we are more interested to know what does the respondent feel, what does the participant experience. And in quantitative research, it's all about moving from theory. Based on a theory, you move on to the hypothesis, right? In all your research, I think you are struggling to find out the theoretical support for your hypothesis, right? So you need to go and look, is there any theoretical support or not? In qualitative research, it's the other way around. You use the data from qualitative research to form a new theory. So theory building is the outcome of qualitative research, whereas in quantitative, you move from theory to hypothesis. Then if you look at the approach, quantitative, as I've already mentioned, is very narrow in nature. It is context free. It doesn't take into consideration whether you are in USA or India or in Sudan. Whereas in qualitative research, it has much broader focus. It is very much relevant to the context in which the study is particularly being held. Then let's move on to the next part. The sample. In quantitative research, we usually call them as respondents. And ideally, in a survey, we should always go for randomized sampling. Probability sampling method is the best form of sampling for getting good results in a quantitative research. And before we start the data collection, we would have identified the sampling frame. This is my sampling frame. This is my population. This is my sample. This is my exclusion criteria, inclusion criteria. Everything would have been decided prior to that. Whereas in a qualitative research, the people who participate in your interviews or focus group discussion, we call them as participants, not respondents. So, which term do you think is more strong, participating or responding? Participating is more like you are more involved in the process, whereas respondent, you are not getting to ask any question, you are only responding to one particular stimulus. Whatever is being asked, you just have that too. You can't answer anything you want. You can just ask strongly agree to, strongly disagree. Out of the 5 choices, only one option is there. Whereas in qualitative, it's mostly open-ended in nature. You can answer with a wide variety of options. You can even keep on answering for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or even half an hour. I think interviewer would be very happy to get a respondent or a participant who is willing to go on talk for half an hour or 1 hour. And the sampling method is something that evolves over a period of time as we go along with the research. In fact, in qualitative study, qualitative research, we call it as theoretical sampling. Has anyone heard of it? In qualitative research, we go for purposive sampling and theoretical sampling. Have you heard of the term purposive sampling? The type of non-probability sampling method. So purposive means this is the sample. Before you go and interview a person, this is a person who has experience in working in army. So intentionally you have chosen that particular person for your study. That is called purposive sampling. Theoretical sampling means, as I mentioned earlier, in qualitative research, you move towards building a theory. And as you move towards building a theory, depending upon the theoretical or the theory that is being formed, you can keep on modifying the sample that you're going to interview. It is not fixed, it is quite flexible. You can keep on adding or removing the conditions that you have used for selecting the sample if you're going for a qualitative research. Then data collection method, I think it's very obvious. In survey, we usually go for questionnaire. And observation can also be used in quantitative method, but very limited. Any example where we can use observation as a quantitative method? You're observing and you are getting quantitative data. If you're counting the number of footfalls that are happening in a particular theater to watch a movie, you are just observing, standing in front of the theater entrance and just counting how many people are going inside. You can count and you can get exactly the number of people who have purchased the ticket and watched the movie. But you would have also seen people who actually stand there with the microphone, right? The channel people who will ask you, okay, what do you think about the movie? Did you like the movie? The responses to that kind of question is more to do with qualitative research. So observation, if you are just noting down the number of people, then it is quantitative. But if you are also observing how people are experiencing the movie, how many times they are yawning during the movie screening, how many times they are checking the phone during the movie screening, or are they talking with somebody else during the movie. So if you're doing that kind of observation, then it becomes more qualitative in nature. But if you're only counting the number of people who are walking into the movie theater, it is more of a quantitative approach. In qualitative, Of course, we have discussed all that: interviews, observation, historical data, archives, focus group interview, all that will come under qualitative interview. Then analysis, quantitative, you have only one choice: statistical analysis. Whereas in qualitative, you can go for thematic analysis, content analysis, which one of you were talking about. It could be a comparative analysis. Then there is another approach called grounded theory, which some of you might have heard about. Has anyone heard about grounded theory approach? Especially PhD scholars. Some of you might have heard about grounded theory approach, which was popularized by Strauss and Corbin. We'll discuss a little bit about it. Then ethnographic analysis. What do you mean by ethnography? Which people studying which area do you think will mostly be using ethnographic as an approach? Yeah, I heard that. Anthropologist. Anthropologist, what is the Malayalam? I think Narayavamsha Shastrajnan. Yeah, so anthropology, people who are doing research in the area of anthropology, for them, the primary form of research is actually ethnographic research. They want to know about people who are like a particular tribe who is living in Attapadi. Can they go and give a survey to the tribal people in Attapadi to understand their problems? Definitely not. And in order to interview them also, they might not be willing to let strangers come and stay there. Instead of that, you may have to go there, stay with those people for 1 month or 2 months or even 3 months, so that they will start to take you in their confidence. They will start trusting you. Then maybe slowly they will start to share their experiences, share their concerns, share their issues. So those kind of research is called ethnographic research. Then outcome in quantitative, it is definitely a measurable result. In qualitative research, mostly it could be a theory, it could be a story. Like in the case of, if you're going for a case study approach, it's mostly like reading a really good story with a good introduction and a lot of what you call as the twists and turns, and finally a nice conclusion, and maybe something that ends with a question mark. So it's more like a story. Yeah. So these are all the basic differences between quantitative and qualitative research. Is there any point which you want me to elaborate further, or is it clear? Okay, there was one more slide, the last part. You can just have a look at this also. So relationship also, a researcher is more involved in a qualitative research rather than in a quantitative research. I think nowadays, if you are doing a survey research, researchers' interaction with the respondents is very, very limited, especially if you are going for online survey. All that you have to do is create a Google form, take a QR code, or share the Google link with in all the WhatsApp groups. Then you just wait for somebody to just fill your questionnaire. So where is the involvement of the researcher in that study? The researcher is not even knowing who is filling the form. Is the real person filling the form? Is a single person filling multiple forms? You have no idea. Or is it some robot who is actually filling the form? You have no idea. You are just assuming that this is actually being filled by an individual. Whereas in qualitative research, you spend half an hour interviewing a person, definitely you will become much more connected to your participant. You'll feel empathize with them, right? Sometimes you might even feel sympathy or empathy. You will actually get involved in the story that they are telling. Imagine you interviewing a kid and a parent who has been diagnosed with cancer. Do you think will that be a very easy experience for you? Listening to the story of the parent telling first time when they heard about how their kid was diagnosed with cancer, it is going to be a very emotional experience for you also as a researcher. So this is going to be a very much more intrinsic experience, much more emotional experience for the researcher. Then rigor, again for quantitative research, we talk about validity and reliability, which you are all familiar with. In qualitative research, the only way to ensure the rigorousness is by authenticity, trustworthiness, and transferability. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about it maybe towards the latter part of the session. Now, what are the approaches to qualitative research? So you can see there are 5 major approaches. Some of them we have already discussed. First one is phenomenological. Second is grounded theory. Third is ethnography. Fourth is exploratory. Fifth is historical. Again, I'm not going to explain each one of them in detail because each one of them itself can be explained for half an hour or 45 minutes. So I'm just going to give you a very brief outline about it. Qualitative research is more like a, let's say, an iceberg which is immersed in the deep ocean. So I'm just going to tell you only about the tip of the iceberg. So yeah, let me just tell you what is meant by each of the type. Phenomenological approach basically means lived experience. Lived experience means somebody who has actually lived through that particular experience. They are going to share their experience with you. Somebody who had gone through cancer, or somebody who is an HIV patient, or somebody who has been abused by their partner, intimate domestic violence, somebody who has actually gone through that experience. That kind of approach, you call it as phenomenological approach. Now, grounded theory means grounded theory was something that was developed by Strauss and Korber, two researchers who were doing qualitative research. And it was through their research they actually came to the conclusion their research can be used to actually form theory. So, grounded theory has at its base the intention of creating theory based on the data that you are collecting. That's the most simplistic form of definition that I'm giving for grounded theory. It is much more detailed topic than this, but at this point of time, you just need to understand grounded theory is something that is involved in building new theory. Ethnography, I had already talked about ethnography, what anthropologists do. Then exploratory, you have no idea about how people are going to respond to it. It's a relatively new topic. So before introducing a new product, you just interview the people and ask them how likely are you to buy this particular product, or what are the kind of, what emotion do you feel when you see this particular product. Those kind of research comes under exploratory. Then historical means you study about a phenomenon for a particular period of time. You would have heard about cross-sectional and longitudinal studies, right? Longitudinal means, what is meant by longitudinal study? Usually survey, what we do, is it cross-sectional or longitudinal? All the survey research that we do, is it cross-sectional or longitudinal? You can give one of the answer. Cross-sectional means you are giving the data at only one point in time, right? You are not going to give them the survey over and over and again. You give them once, get the data, you are happy. After that, you may not even see them later. So when you're collecting data from a particular group of people, only one time, you call it as cross-sectional survey. Longitudinal means over a period of time. For example, I think the most common example for longitudinal research is twin studies. Twins who are born at the particular time, maybe for some reasons they have been separated. One of them is living with an adoptive set of parents, other twin is living with their own set of parents, and you observe and study them for a period of 20 years and then see if there is any differences in the characteristics and personality of these twins based on whether they were raised by their biological parents or by their adoptive parents. So when you take a particular group of people, respondents, and study them over a period of time, 5 years, 10 years. So I don't think any PhD scholar will ever take longitudinal study because it's going to be a very lengthy process. So for PhD work, we always end up going with the cross-sectional method. But there are researchers who go for longitudinal study. So historical data, the advantage is you are going, it's more like doing postmortem. You are going back, doing a study based on how this particular individual has experienced in the last 10 years or last 5 years based on historical data. So that is an example for historical approach to qualitative study. I'll give examples for that. So phenomenology basically is lived experience. Grounded theory result in theory development, and it is an inductive method. You would have heard about inductive and deductive approaches in research, so I'm not going to repeat it. Then you can see an example for phenomenology. This is taken from a journal of this, I forgot the name of the journal, JBS. a phenomenological study of the experience of domestic violence in Iranian women with HIV. So this is specifically about the experience of women in Iran who has been subjected to domestic violence and who also had been diagnosed with HIV. So you cannot just give them a questionnaire. You have to go and meet them, talk with them, spend hours of time with them. Then you write down all the experiences as they are saying. Then you do the analysis and present it in the form of a paper. So this is an example for phenomenological study. Then I mentioned about grounded theory. This is actually the classic book written by Glaser and Strauss, The Discovery of Grounded Theory Strategies for Qualitative Research. This is also, I would say, the second Bible if you are interested in doing qualitative research, Grounded Theory Approach by Glaser and Strauss. They were both sociologists, faculty with the sociology background who were doing research. They wrote this book in 1960s and 1980s also. They came up with a lot of further revised versions of the book, and they are considered to be the godfathers in this particular area. So those of you are interested may go back and refer to this book. Now, at the top you can see a picture, a very famous person who is observing chimpanzees. So there are a lot of researchers who are doing wildlife research. Do you think such researchers, can they go and give a survey or interview? The only way out for them is to go and observe in the natural setting. So she is a person called Jane Goodall. Has anyone heard of her? She is one of the most famous wildlife researcher in the entire world. Her name is Jane Goodall. So she is actually a pioneer in the area of wildlife research, especially focusing on the lives of chimpanzees. So maybe you might feel, why can't she go to a zoo and observe how the chimpanzees are behaving? She won't do it because she is interested in knowing how the chimpanzees behave in a natural environment. So if you're going to a zoo and observing, it's not naturalistic. She really wanted to study the behavior of chimpanzees in their natural setting. So this type of behavior that she's doing, this research is called naturalistic observation. So this is an example for ethnographic research also. She is going to the forest, living there, spending time with the wild animals amongst them, and she is using observation as a research method. She is observing. So again, those of you are interested can go and read more about Jane Goodall. She is one of the most famous researcher in the area of wildlife. Now, then we spoke about historical study. So this is another example for a research that has been published in Nursing Journal, a historical study of men in nursing. So if you look historically, nursing is a profession which was considered to be a female dominated profession for a very long period of time. There are only very few men who take nursing as a profession in comparison to female. So this particular study wanted to look at the experience of men in nursing. I think they have taken a 10-year period from 1998 to 2008. What was the experience of men or male nurses? So for that, the researcher has taken the approach of a historical study. So these are all the various approaches that we can take. I hope you got at least you got familiarized with the various approaches that we can use in qualitative method. Now again, I'll ask you a few questions. It's quiz time. I have to ensure you are not sleeping and you are with me. Yeah. So the first question. Which of the following is true about qualitative research? Which of the following is true about qualitative research? Yeah, C is the right answer. Focus is on studying the whole. We are not just worried about one variable or two variable. You are focused on studying, understanding the phenomenon as a whole. Yes, good. Let's move on to the next one. Very easy question actually. Yeah, so the answer is A. It's based on words rather than numbers. And the other options are all applicable for quantitative research.
Quantitative research seems straightforward to independent.
Okay, yeah. So the answer is A, based on words rather than numbers. I think I have one more question, so let's move on to that. So now we are just moving on to the methods by which qualitative research can be done. In fact, we have discussed many of them already. So I'll just quickly go through them. We have to keep a track of the time also. Yeah. So one-on-one interview, I think that is something which you are all familiar with. Case study, we have already discussed it. Focus group also, we have mentioned about it slightly. Ethnographic, I had shown you the example of how Jane Goodall actually went to the forest and did an ethnographic research. And the last one is observation. Now, focus group, any idea what it is actually? How many members will be there in a focus group? What is the ideal number for a focus group? Should it be too small or too big? Can I have 20 members in my focus group?
No.
Yeah, the answer is no. I think somebody is becoming too enthusiastic. Yeah, that's okay. But anyway, the answer is wrong. You can't have a focus group as large as 20. So what should be the ideal number? Is there any, you can give me a range because there is not one number. You can give me a range of number. Yeah, 8 to 12 or something like that could be a good number to have a focus group discussion. And what happens in a focus group discussion? Okay, I'll tell you one research problem for which the project which I'm doing presently, for which I'm planning to use focus group discussion. Is there anyone who has heard about menstrual cup? Yeah, so menstrual cup is a menstrual hygiene management product which is relatively new in our culture. But I think there are few of you. Is there anyone who has started to use it, who's using it? No one, but some of you have heard about it. So in a focus group interview, so in our culture, there is still a lot of stigma about the use of menstrual cup. Many people are not aware about it. So I'm interested to know what are the reasons for people's reluctance in using menstrual cup. And this particular study I'm conducting among college students. So what I will do is I'll call a group of 8 to 10 students, introduce to them this product called menstrual cup, and then I will ask them about what do they think about menstrual cup. So that will be kind of moderated. I will start by asking how many of you have heard about it, where have you heard about it, or what do you know about this product? Have any one of you tried it, or do you know anyone who has ever used this particular product? What was their experience? So if you are given a choice, will you be using it? What are your concerns about using this particular product? So each of the group member will be given an opportunity to come up with what do they think about this particular product. So this can go on for half an hour to 45 minutes, after which I'll get a much better understanding about what a group of people feel about this particular product called menstrual cup. So that is called focus group interview. This is very commonly used by market researchers before launching a new product, or when they want to introduce a new flavor. For example, Kellogg's, if they want to introduce a new flavor of cornflakes, let's say they want to introduce mango flavored cornflakes or blueberry flavored cornflakes. Usually we are familiar with the strawberry flavored and chocolate flavored. So before introducing a new flavor, they want to know if they introduce this new flavor, is it going to be accepted by the customers or not? They can't take the risk of launching the product and then going on loss. So before that, they need to get an idea about what does the prospective customers think about it. So maybe they'll give them all a sample of some cornflakes, ask them to taste it, and after that they can share their feedback. Some of them will say maybe I like it, or I might need to have more flavor, or some of them will say it has an artificial flavor so I don't like it. So whatever be the case. So this is an example for a focus group discussion. Yeah. Now I'll just explain few more concepts. So observation we have already discussed, but these are some of the examples for participant observation, some other scenarios in which researchers can become an observer. So becoming a firefighter. So if your study is on understanding the challenges and risks faced by firefighters in their profession, you can give them a questionnaire and get it. But more than that, if you actually get training as a firefighter and do the job along with them, actually in the scene where a fire is happening, That will give you much more insights about what are the risks and challenges that they are facing. You can actually observe them. Or enrolling in a flight training school or working in a mental hospital. You want to understand the impact of music on patients who are staying in a mental asylum. So maybe you can spend time there, like as a doctor or as a pretending to be a patient, so that you can observe how the patients are responding to the particular music that is being played there. Yes, it is very risky, but there are a lot of researchers who does it. Or being a cocktail waitress to understand how people behave in a cafe, restaurant, or maybe when they are intoxicated, how people behave. So maybe you can go to a bar, pretend to be somebody who is drinking, but you will actually be observing and noting down how people are reacting or how people are behaving. I think usually the journalists do it, right? They go undercover and do it, journalists and detectives. So researcher is also somebody like a journalist or a detective who is trying to find answer to certain questions. Or living among mushroom hunters of the Northwest. So these are all some examples of the kind of problems for which you can use observation or participant observation as a method. Yeah. Yeah, that's the reason why now there is something called IRB, that is Institutional Review Board. In India, it's not yet popular, but in Western countries and European countries, before you launch a particular methodology, it has to be approved by the ethical committee board that your presence as a researcher is not going to harm any of the activities or any of the respondents in any way. Only if you get that approval from the committee, you can go ahead with the research. Okay, so this is just to break the monotony. You can have a look at the cartoon that tells us about some of the problems of interview. Sometimes if the interviewer is biased, then whatever you do, it's not going to help you. So as a researcher, if you're going for an interview method or a focus group method, you should be trained enough. Don't think that you can just like that go and start asking them with questions. Sometimes you might be in a hurry to finish your interview, or you might become too enthusiastic. And what if you are not letting the other person complete the answers? How will the interviewee feel? You are asking one question, he or she has started to ask 2 minutes, you're like, okay, let's move on to the next question. That's not professional. So it is also important to get professional training as an interviewer. If you're planning to use interview as a methodology, there are a lot of etiquettes that you have to follow. If you're planning to use interview or observation or even focus group methodology as a qualitative, and the question that you asked regarding ethical concerns, it is much more pronounced in a qualitative interview than in a quantitative methodology, because you are getting in direct contact with your respondent, with your participant. See, you are going to interview somebody who has gone through sexual abuse. After interviewing for half an hour, they are started to cry. They are getting a panic attack. How will you react? You as a researcher should be trained to deal with that kind of situation. You should know, you shouldn't just run away from the situation. You should, okay, bye. You shouldn't just run away. You should know how to deal with that particular situation in a very professional manner. So again, if you're planning to go for this kind of qualitative method, you should make sure that you get adequate training before going for any of the qualitative methods. Yeah. So this is an example for how focus group interviews could be done. Group of people will be seated around a round table. In this case, it's not exactly a round table. So any form of arrangement wherein people will be sharing their viewpoints, and that will be either video recorded or audio recorded, and later that conversation can be analyzed. So these are all certain examples for other forms of qualitative methods which has been published. So factors influencing food choices of adolescent, finding from focus group discussion with adolescents. Now another example for case study, factors affecting training effectiveness in the context of introduction of new technology, a US case study. So you can see all forms of qualitative methods are also published. Don't think that publication will happen only if you're going for a quantitative approach. In social sciences, it is relatively easy to get published if you are going for quantitative method. I agree that, but right now there has been a slight shift towards qualitative approach as well. So right now a lot of journals are focusing entirely on qualitative approach, which is a positive thing. Yeah. Another thing is what should be the sample size? In quantitative approach, I think you are all familiar with something called a formula for calculating the sample size, right? In most of the evaluation viva that you sit for, all the students come up with a slide on sample size calculation was done based on this formula. And I think most of them have a magic number of 360 or 380. Yeah, 384 is to be precise. So that is the magic number that everybody is looking for. The moment it crosses 384, you are all happy and relieved. So what is the magic number in qualitative research? If you're going for an interview, how many people should you interview? How do you decide on that number? So we go for something called saturation, theoretical saturation. Now, the problem here is it's again very subjective in nature. Saturation means you interview 20 people, you have got lot of information. You interview 10 more people, but you are not getting any additional information. So you got exactly the same information which you got after interviewing 20 people. Even after interviewing 30 candidates, it's exactly the same information. You are not getting any additional information. Then you can say you have reached a level of saturation. And there is no further point in spending your time and energy on interviewing more number of people. So there is no magic number. It's all up to the researcher depending upon the research problem. We call it as saturation. But usually some people say 20 is a good number, 30 is a good number. It also depends upon your research problem, your sample, how difficult or how scarce is your sample, or how popular or how easy it is to get your sample. Now, we are moving to a concept called triangulation. So just look at this particular scenario. So imagining that you are going for a hike, maybe to Munnar to see the Neelakurinji. You are doing the entire hike, going up and getting the view. But you will be getting the view only from one particular angle, right? Somebody else would have hiked the mountain from the other side of the hill. He or she might be getting a totally different view. And the photo that you are taking, the clarity of the view will also vary depending upon the camera that you are having or the phone that you are using. Somebody might be having an iPhone, somebody might be having a Samsung, somebody might be having a Redmi. So depending upon the call camera type or the mobile phone you are having, the picture taken from the same angle will be looking different. Then the view will also be different depending upon the climate conditions, right? Whether you are climbing during, maybe the timing also, whether you are climbing, making the hike during the morning time or the noon time or the evening, during hot time or during when it is raining or when it was fog was there. So there could be a lot of different views depending upon what time you were doing the hike, which angle you were taking, which part of the hill you were approaching, and whether what was the climate conditions and so on. Same way, when you're doing a qualitative approach, sometimes you might be taking only a one particular perspective. So in order to avoid that, to get an integrated view of the issue, it is important to go for a method called triangulation. So I'll just tell you what is triangulation. So this is just an explanation of whatever I was telling right now. So depending upon, maybe somebody would have got a binocular or a telescope, they might get a much better view. So view can vary depending upon who you are and what are the technology that you are using and everything. So same is the case with research also, qualitative research also. So in order to overcome this issue, we have to go for something called triangulation. Triangulation means doing or collecting data from multiple perspectives and multiple methods. So I'll just tell you what it means. So triangulation could be done in 4 different ways. Data triangulation means
If you are interview people from different locations. If you're sampling frame, if you're planning to do a study in Kerala, don't just limit your interview only from people who are only from Ernakulam. For example, my study on menstrual cup, if I'm doing the study only in Ernakulam, it might be biased because I think the MP of Ernakulam, Haibi Eden, has actually launched a program called Cup of Life. So there is obviously a chance that students in Ernakulam district are much more aware about menstrual cup than somebody from Wayanad or Idukki. So in order to get a much more holistic viewpoint, I may have to interview people from different locations within Kerala. Or you can even do the process during different time slot. Then investigator triangulation can also be done. Instead of one single person collecting the data can be collected by multiple researchers so that you can get multiple perspective. So maybe multiple maybe in the forms of gender, people with different age group. If you are interviewing somebody who is of old age, if you are an youngster, the rapport that you can build with an old lady might be totally different from the rapport can be made with another person who is in 50s or 60s. So maybe if possible, try to include investigators from different age groups, different socioeconomic status. Then type of informant also. Try to include people from multiple background. If your data objective or if your research objective is suitable for it, include both women and men, both young and old, people from different ethno group, people from different socioeconomic status. Methodologically also, you can try to do it in different ways rather than focusing on one single aspect. So this method is called triangulation. So triangulation is a method by which you can increase or improve the reliability and validity of qualitative research. In quantitative, we are all familiar with improving the reliability and validity. Same way in qualitative, we can go for triangulation as a method to improve the reliability and validity of your approach. Now we'll quickly move on to the analysis part. Okay, so doing qualitative analysis is very similar to cleaning out your closet. So I think especially women might be able to relate to this. When you really want to arrange your closet, how do you start out? First you pull out everything from the closet. Then what is the next step? Yeah, you start arranging them, but will there be any logic for the arrangement? What is the in scientific way? Some of you might be following certain ways, right? Either you can classify the cloth according to the type of cloth, like all the salwars in one end, the saris in one end, or something like that. Some people might do color coding, all blue color dress in one area or something like that. So if you are doing that kind of approach when you're cleaning your closet, the same approach has to be used when you are starting with your qualitative data also. When you start with, you might feel overwhelmed. You might be like, there is a lot of information. And there is one more issue. If you're doing qualitative study, especially interviews or focus group discussion, one thing is you can get permission from the participant to record the conversation. Sometimes they might agree, sometimes they might disagree. No, you cannot record it. Then how will you note down the information? You should write it down using shorthands. That's very important because don't keep it for later because you will forget half of the content by the time you reach home and you start writing it down. If they agree to record it, it's really good, well and good. Nowadays, many people agree to record it. So either it could be a mobile phone recorder, or if you're going for an online mode like Zoom meeting or something, you can even go for video recording if they are okay with it. But the next step and the most important step is to make a transcript which is verbatim. What do you mean by verbatim? Exactly as they have told. Don't summarize from their responses and write in your words. Whatever they have told, exactly the same words that they have used, you have to write it down in document. So don't use your logic there. Verbatim means exactly word by word, whatever they have told, you have to reproduce in a document. Then you have to start doing the analysis. So take everything out of the closet, then sort everything out. Some of the dresses you might decide to keep, some of the dresses you might decide to throw away, either because you have bored or you have outgrown them or it's out of fashion, whatever be the reason. Same is the case with data also. There might be a lot of information which is not needed. Many a times when you interview, people will start telling all their personal stories also, which may not be relevant to your research. So you can remove all that irrelevant information from your data and focus only on things which are relevant. Then you have to start categorizing them or chunking them together. There has to be a logic for chunking them together. Then you have to start organizing them. Okay, so I'll give you a task for you all. Can you all take your mobile phone? I think most of you are anyways having mobile phone. So just take your mobile phone, open your gallery. I'm sure there are a lot of photographs, right? In your gallery. Just go through the photographs and try to see, can you categorize the photos in your gallery according to some themes? Yeah, so start doing it. I just don't need an yes or no response. You have to do it. So take your phone, open the gallery. Maybe you can take the last 1 month photo if you are having too many photos. I don't know, like that depends upon how active you are in taking photos. So you can take 1 or 2 months photos and try to see, can you organize them in any way? So I'll just give you like a couple of minutes. You can take some time, scroll through all the photos and try to note down the categories by which you can classify the photos that you are having. So photos are nothing but qualitative data. Photos are qualitative data. So how can you categorize the qualitative data? So if you can identify any category, you can note it down in a piece of paper. It's totally your choice. Each one of you might be having different categorization, different coding, no issues. Students in the back row, you are not allowed to carry your mobile phones, or you are scared to take out the mobile phones which you are actually having. Yeah, so those of you who have your mobile phones can take your mobile phone and see. I think all the research scholars are having the mobile phones with you. Have you all completed? I think some of you have already completed. That easy. Sorting your photos, categorizing them. Okay, so any volunteer who would like to say how you have categorized the photos in your gallery? Yeah. Your people. Okay, so is that just one category or? Yeah, so one could be family, like my people, and outsiders, like not my people, people who are not close to me. That could be one category. Then another could be, yeah, screenshots and actual photos. Then places. Sometimes it could only be sceneries, maybe only places and faces. Some photos will be actual people who are there in the photo. In some photos, there may not be any person. It will only be places. And places itself, you can subcategorize them into urban and rural. Or maybe you can say tourist places and working places. So maybe tourist place itself, if you are an avid traveler, tourist places itself, you can categorize them into beaches and mountains. And maybe again, beaches itself, you can subcategorize based on the location, like Kerala beaches or Goa beaches or whatever. So this is just an example of how you can go on with the categorization and find the subcategories and so on. So I hope you got a very basic idea about how to start with the categorization and coding of your data. In the case of photos, it is much easier and it could be done much more faster. But when it is actually words, it will take more time. So these are the different stages. Whatever we have discussed so far, you'll start with collecting the data. Then you will prepare the data. You will eliminate all the unwanted information. Then you have to keep on examining the data. See, here it is written as one single statement, but it's a very time consuming process. You have to read the interview transcript or any data over and over and over again. Don't stop reading with one time. Read it once, twice, thrice, 4 times, 5 times. Read it over and over and again before you start coding. So don't think that, okay, I just got the data, I will read and I will finish the coding immediately. That shouldn't be the way. You have to keep on reading it again and again and again, do the coding. Then maybe you can give it to one more person also to do the coding. See whether the coding done by you and the coding done by the second person, are they similar or different? If it is similar, well and good. Which one? Yeah, coding actually I have on the slide on this. Yeah. There is a method actually called constant comparison method. So earlier I was talking about Glaser and Strauss, who has popularized the concept of grounded theory. So this is a method which was popularized by Glaser and Strauss called constant comparison method. So you will start by reading, read it multiple times. With every reading, you start identifying certain codes or categories. Then again you read and try to see whether it is similar or dissimilar to something that you have read in the earlier paragraphs. In that way, you have to keep on collating all the like-minded codes in one particular angle. So I'll just go here. So you have to do the coding, assign the code to the data. Maybe I'll just show you one live example. This is something which I have actually done. So I'll very quickly show it. So this is one interview which I had done. So this is my interview transcript. Even before that, I'll just show you. Yeah. So this is the interviews which I have done. The entire transcript is written down here verbatim. Whatever they have told, exactly the same thing I have reported. This was, most of them were Zoom interviews. Some of the interviews were direct, which I had recorded. So whatever they have told, I have actually written it down. So you can see for one person itself, there is many things. Then this is respondent number 2. Again, respondent number 2 is giving all his responses, lot of experiences. Respondent number 3 and so on. Then I'll just show you how I did the theming. So this was the socio-demographic details of the faculty. Then I started by identifying some of the themes. So one of the theme was gender. Then I started to identify the code given by the respondents under this particular theme. So this particular code was given by respondent number 1. Then similarly, there were 2 other codes which were given by respondent number 1. This is given by respondent number 2. Then you can see a response which was given by respondent number 4. Another given by respondent number 6. So I have identified the theme called gender. Under that particular theme, I have listed down all the respondents who have given some kind of response which is falling under the category called gender. So there are so many. Then there is another thing called power, type of bullying, management response, employee stress, impact on department. So you can see a lot of other themes that I have identified. I'll also show you one more thing. So this is another theme which I have done. So starting with, this is the major theme. Who is the bully? Sub-theme is gender. Then what is the bullying strategy? So again, the sub-themes that I have identified are what is the motivation for bullying and what are the forms of bullying. Again, don't worry about the terms, that is closely related to my research area. Forms of bullying. That again, I have found out one more sub-theme. Position of bully, gender of bully, and work experience of the target. Then depersonalized bullying, sub-theme is bullying. Then complaints and grievance, sub-themes are voice versus silence, action taken, reporting dilemma. Gender and culture is again coming here as sub-themes. Support system, it could be positive or negative. And support system can come from colleagues, institutions, or from family and friends. And how did they give support? Talking with friends. Then coping with bullying. How did people cope with bullying? Sub-themes were the defense mechanisms they have used, the emotional response, spill over to family and work, and the final outcome. Now, defense mechanism I have subdivided into positive and negative, which included talking with friends, using humor, taking the anger out on others, confronting the bully, coping destructively, and exit response strategies. I know just by looking at it, it may be difficult to understand everything, but this is something which I have done for my research, which was purely based on the interviews that I have done on 13 respondents. So this was the response, the interview transcript, which I have done for 13 interviews. So I started with all this transcript. Then I moved on to identifying some of the themes. Then I moved on to subcategorize them. I'll also show you one final paper which I have written based on that. Yeah, so this is again one paper which I have written based on it. So here I can see how I have found out that some of the themes. I started by asking the question, academic bullying, who does the bullying, why it happens, how it happens, and how people respond to bullying. This was my first theme. Then I started with the who question. Who is the bully? It could be the supervisor, subordinate, peer, or top administration. But I'll just keep. Yeah. Then I moved on to this part. This is why people bully. So why people bully? Based on the gender, based on the management power, certain other general, some of the causes were labeled as general. Then how did they bully? What was the bullying strategies that were used? Yeah. So how did they bully? All that is given here. Yeah. Was it personal bullying, favoritism, or was it work-related bullying? So all these themes I identified after doing the coding based on the interview transcript. And it's very difficult to explain the entire process in one single session because this is something which has happened over, I think, almost 2 months or 3 months work. Yeah. So I'll just get back to the slides.
Ma'am,
yeah,
I had a doubt. So when the coding happens, like you mentioned, it's very subjective, and there are chances of having a bias also, like the way you have categorized and subcategorized, and there's further classification there again. But again, if I do such a research, I may or may not, or those ideas may not come to me that, first who did the bullying, why, what motivated them, and all of that. Can you hear me now, ma'am?
Can you just type down the question in the chat box? I think that would be better so that somebody can read it out to me.
Yeah, sure.
In my case, what I did was I have done the coding and I had a co-author. So she also did the coding. And we just did a comparison of both the coding to ensure that we were both at the same pace and the coding was in consensus. Yeah, you had a question. That I just wanted to, I gave certain color highlights in the interview transcript to highlight it. That was for my own convenience. Some people do color coding, some people use the stick-it notes. So like that, just for our own convenience. Okay, so there is one question, how to handle subjectivity in coding. Yeah, I think the answer to that was something which I gave earlier. The best way is to have more than one coder to do the coding, because if it is just one single researcher, the chances of subjectivity could be very high. So at least if two people could do the coding, that would be really one way to reduce the subjectivity aspect. Yeah, so I think I'll just continue. If there is any question coming meanwhile in the chat box, just let me know. almost towards the end. Yeah, so this is something which I have already done. Transcription is also a very important aspect of the analysis. You have to do it verbatim. Exactly how they are given, that has to be done verbatim. And if it is observation or if you have video footage, then it is even more challenging to do the coding. You have to play and replay the video over and over again in order to identify the pattern of movement and everything. And I think there are some softwares which actually helps in converting the audio into text also. I think even in Zoom that option is there. The only thing is you may have to be a bit concerned about the accent. If you're talking in your Indian accent and the Zoom translation might not happen exactly the words that you are saying. So that issue is there. So if you are interviewing with Indians, I think Zoom transcript may not work all the time. You can try your luck with that. Yeah. Yeah. Then you have to translate in English, then the job is actually much more. It's even more difficult. In the sense, again, the procedure is exactly the same like how we do translation of the questionnaire. Sometimes you might be having the questionnaire in survey in English, and your participants might be people who don't know English. So you may have to translate it into Malayalam. So even for that, there are certain methodological procedure that you have to do. You have to first translate Malayalam to English, English to Malayalam. Then based on that Malayalam, you have to translate back to English and see if there is any discrepancy between the original English and the translated English. And same thing, you can do it with people who are good in English. Like usually we get the help of English professors and try to see is there, we can get the translation done by 3 professors of English and see if there is any difference in the translation that they have done and not. So when it is interview transcript and getting translated by another person, it's a very time consuming process. But you have there is no other way you have to do, especially if you are looking at publication point of view. Unfortunately, we don't have any way of publishing this kind of work in Malayalam or any other vernacular language for that matter. If you're only interested in, I think even if you're writing your thesis, you have to write in English. So definitely translation is an extra work. There is no other way for it. Yeah. Question. Okay. What was the question? How to classify the finds overlapping themes? Should we mention the same paper under the 2 different themes which are writing while we do thematic analysis using literature? Yeah. So sometimes one, especially if you're looking at review of literature, one paper might be having multiple themes. You can write it under multiple themes. Even if they are overlapping, it is okay to write it under multiple themes. And you can mention in your interpretation, like only this aspect of this particular paper is belonging to one particular theme. Another aspect of the paper is belonging to another theme, and so on. And in some papers, they actually write a separate section on overlapping themes. So that is also possible. There might be 1 or 2 things which might be falling under different themes at the same time. So you can write it as overlapping theme, and that becomes the scope of further study. Just like how you write the scope of further study in your quantitative research. If it is just like when you do factor loading, you might have heard about cross loading. Sometimes the same variable might be getting loaded in 2 different factors. So then we say we are not very sure to which factor the variable actually belongs to. The same logic applies here. Sometimes one particular content might be belonging to 2 themes at the same time, or it might be confusing. So you can report it and say, there is scope for further research on that particular content. Yeah, I hope that answered your question. Okay, let me just quickly rush through the remaining slides. I know we are about to reach the time. Yeah. Okay, now analysis could be of 2 types, thematic and content. So content is more peripheral in nature, thematic is much more deeper. So content means just by looking at like what you did with the mobile phone photos, that is more like a content analysis. The one which I had shown you from my research, that is more to do with the thematic analysis. In this time frame, it is difficult to explain both in detail. So just be aware that there are two types, content and thematic. So later, maybe if we have another sessions or something, we can focus only on analysis part. Now, this is another example. Based on this particular paragraph, these were some of the themes that they were identified by the researcher. Similarly, there was one exercise which I was planning to make you do, so but I don't think we have that time for it. So we'll do one thing. You can just distribute it to all of them. They can try attempting the thematic analysis after the session. That will give them some idea about hands-on experience on how to do it. So meanwhile, you can just have a look at this particular paragraph and see how they have identified the themes. So this was, I think, a response given by a parent based on the medical experience his child had. Okay, so here you can see in this paragraph, based on this very small paragraph itself, some of the themes identified are acknowledgement of limited knowledge about professions, role of pediatrician and adverse impact on outcome, link between pamphlet and positive action, negative feelings about delayed referral, consequence of delayed referral, huge parental effort. So this is not actually content. After reading the entire response, you are trying to identify some of the basic themes that were reflected in this particular paragraph. So it's all about how a parent perceived the experience of experience with a pediatrician. So the second column is just like verbatim, just normal statements. From that conversation, we are able to identify theoretical themes. So it takes a lot of time for you to read. So maybe in first reading itself, you will not be able to identify all the themes. You have to read it over and over and over again, and more number of paragraphs you have, it becomes much more difficult, much more elaborate, exhaustive process. So constant comparison method is nothing but keeping one of the approaches that we have to use in order to do the qualitative analysis method. So I'm not getting into the details of it. It's all about continually comparing some different incidents over the different data. That is called constant comparison method. So these are the 4 stages according to the grounded theory model. You start with open coding, then you do axial coding, then you go selective coding. From the selective coding, you will come to the theoretical model. So open coding, you start with the concept. In my case, I started with bullying. Then I started with axial coding, like who is the bully, like how is the bullying done, why does bullying happen. That was my axial coding. Then under selective coding, under each category, I identified sub-themes. So who is the bully? It could be supervisor, it could be your colleague, it could be your students, or it could be your peer, whatever it is. So that is selective coding. And based on all that, I ultimately came to one particular model that is talking about bullying. Who is the bully? How is the bullying done? Why does the bullying happen? And how do people respond to bullying? So that's how I came to my theoretical model based on the 4 steps of open coding, axial coding, selective coding. Now, all these processes are elaborated in detail in the book by Glaze. So we'll stop with this particular slide. So I hope even after listening the entire session, if you're going to ask this type of question, then there is no point. I hope you have understood some of the basic ideas behind why to do qualitative research and how to do qualitative research. And both doing qualitative research and analysis of qualitative research, both are time consuming processes. That is the reason why people sometimes are hesitant towards moving towards it. But it is a very effective tool. It gives you much more in-depth information rather than going for quantitative research. Personally, as a researcher also, as I mentioned earlier, when I started my research, I was somebody who was predominantly focusing only on quantitative research. So only since the last 5 years, I have moved towards qualitative. But after doing qualitative research personally, I feel more happy and satisfied. I feel my research has actually come out with some really good outcomes. Because in quantitative, we all know, like, even though we say some, we know how to manipulate the data. We know how to actually come out with a separate model fit, or how to tweak the data a little bit here and there so that you will ultimately get the model fit. Whereas if it is a qualitative research, you feel you have actually touched the life of few people. You have actually made an impact on them. Because in all the interviews which after I completed my interviews, I felt a connection with all the respondents and they were also feeling relieved. So we feel we have actually done something for them also, because many of them actually feel emotional catharsis after sharing their views with us. So we all know, like, nowadays the most difficult thing or most difficult person to get now is somebody to listen to our ideas. Nobody has time to listen to us. Everybody wants to talk. So when you're doing qualitative research, you are giving them all your ears for 45 minutes, 1 hour. So many people might actually like to share their ideas just to have a listener that will actually touch their lives. So personally, I found the experience of doing qualitative research much more rewarding. Talking from publication point of view, yes, quantitative research, it is more easier to get published. But as I said, qualitative research is also catching up. There are journals which are focusing only on qualitative research also. But if you are in literature or anthropology or sociology, then I don't think that should be a constraint. This constraint is only for people who are doing research in the area of management, where it is predominantly quantitative oriented. So, but that should not be a constraint for not using qualitative. So, to all my PhD students, I tell them, I insist that they do a combination of both qualitative and quantitative. Yeah, so with that, I think, yeah, it's exactly the time as per the schedule. 12:25 was the vote of thanks. So I have concluded my session. So I don't know whether, do we have the time to take any questions, or maybe one or two questions we can take if you, I have think during the session also you were asking me questions. There is software like NVivo is one of the most commonly used software. But again, software also has a lot of limitations. So it may not be perfect. Even if you are using a software, it won't give you an output like how SPSS or AMOS gives you an output. You have to do a lot more work even after the software gives you the output. But if you are in marketing area and you are trying to do analysis on, let's say, I didn't mention about it, but there are a lot of researchers who do research based on Facebook content or Twitter content. So those type of content softwares are much more useful, or based on the reviews that are given by customers on e-commerce platform, like Amazon reviews or Flipkart reviews or TripAdvisor reviews. So there are a lot of researchers who do research based on reviews given by people based on the social media platforms or other e-commerce platform. That is called text analytics or sentimental analysis. That's again a very wider area. Again, I'm not an expert in that area also, but I know there is something called text analysis and sentimental analysis, wherein just by looking at the review, you try to classify the customers were happy or sad or angry or frustrated after making purchase. So there are a lot of keywords that people write in their reviews, right? Worst product ever to buy, or really good product. I will never ever buy this product from this site. So those kind of text analytics or sentimental analysis, for those aspects, you can go for softwares. QDA is there. So there are a lot of other softwares which are available for, especially if you are into text analytics and sentimental analysis. I have done only focus group and interviews as a method. That's the reason why I focused mainly on what I am more familiar with. Can you highlight little about free listing and IT method to use qualitative? Any open source software for qualitative analysis? Open source, there is nothing that is really good. The most commonly used one is NVivo, but that is not open source. You have to buy it. Okay, is there any process for preparing interview schedule? Yes, process in the sense, okay, I'll just show you the interview schedule which I prepared, interview questions. Yeah, So this was the interview schedule that I prepared for the interview transcript that I was showing you earlier. But I did the study while I was in US as part of my Fulbright fellowship. So there in that university, it was mandatory to get the approval of IRB, that Institute Review Board. So all my questionnaire, all the method, like whatever tools or whatever materials I was using for my study, everything had to be vetted and approved by the board. So the board had gone through the entire questions and they have given some suggestions regarding what should be the wording of the question and everything. The general guideline is that the interview schedule should be based on your research objective. Accordingly, you should start framing the question. I have followed, it's not like I followed exactly the same questions. This was more like a schedule. I started with one, and as and when, depending upon the responses given by the other respondents, I moved to the another questions. So this was just a general guideline. So in the interview schedule, you should ensure that all the questions for which you are looking responses should be there. That is the only thing. So this was what something which I really wanted to specify. Describe the experience. That's how I started the interview. How did they feel? Is there anything that stands out about the experience? Did you intervene in this particular incident? Have you witnessed bullying in the workplace which was directed toward you? Describe feelings. Again, the same thing. Did you seek any assistance or advice about the experiences you were feeling? If yes, ask the sub-question 1. How did you decide whom you would confide in for assistance with your experience and feeling? If they are answering no, then I will go to sub-question 2. Why did you not seek assistance or advice about your experience and feelings? How did you react to the situation? And what was your motivation for reacting in a particular way? Some of them said, I just kept silent. Some of them said, I just went and complained. So, what was their motivation for complaining, or what was their motivation for not complaining? Last, I ended with, do you have any recommendation on how to deal with bullying at workplace? So, this was the general format of the interview schedule that I formed. The only idea was it had to be in tandem with my research objectives, and all the research questions had to get answers based on this particular schedule, and it didn't have to be very long also. So that's how I prepared the interview schedule, and it was vetted by the internal institutional review board of the university. If you don't have an IRB, it is always advisable to get it vetted by experts. Just like how you have content validity in your questionnaire, the same way you can get content validity for your interview schedule also with people who are expert in this area. Is there any other question? Okay, narrative analysis. Again, I'm not a very expert in the area of narrative analysis. So it may, like I don't want to get into that area. Different and okay. Will the coding method be different under various qualitative methods such as phenomenology? Yeah, so phenomenology means it's an approach. Even phenomenology, you can get it either as a case study or as an interview method or as a focus group discussion. So all the methods you can use exactly the same method, like starting with the open coding, axial coding, specific coding, and theme. It doesn't have to be different, because grounded theory approach talks about coding or qualitative analysis in general. Only for text analysis, or only if you are going for content and thematic analysis, there you have to use different strategies. As I mentioned earlier, content analysis, you will be more focused only on the superficial aspect about how many people have used the word hate in this particular paragraph, or how many times have this person used the word hate, how many times have this person used the word suicide, how many times have the person used the word something else. So that is more like content approach. Thematic approach will be much more than that, getting into more broader things. Yeah, so I think this question is already answered. When we prepare interview schedule, what all should be taken care? We have to use a validated scale. So in interview schedule, there is nothing like a pre-existing interview schedule. You have to create your own. Maybe you can refer some thesis and find something that had been used by others, but you have to contextualize it and get it vetted by experts in the name of content validity. Yeah, so I think most of the questions have been answered. Yeah, so I think with that we can wind up the session. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for your patient listening. I have already distributed one, I think, document which you can read later and try to attempt thematic analysis.
Om Amriteshwari Namaha. Good afternoon, one and all present here. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for the webinar on quantitative research method organized by Department of Commerce and Management, Amrita School of Arts, Humanities and Commerce. This program is among various programs organized by Research Club. Let me first start all by giving my gratitude to the glory of Almighty God and our guiding light of Amrita Vishwabhidam, Sri Mata Amritanandamai, world lovingly called as Amma, for blessing each one of us. I would like to thank our resource person, Dr. DEVI SOUMYAJA, Assistant Professor, School of Management Studies, Cochin University of Science Technology. Ma'am, I thank you for the inspiring and elaborate sessions on qualitative research methods, which helped each and every scholars who participate in the sessions. Thank you, ma'am. I extend my gratitude to our beloved director, U. Krishnakumar sir, for giving us strength to conduct such a vibrant program, which was well attended by scholars and other universities also. Your able guidance was always encouraged. Thank you, sir. A special thanks to Dr. P. Balasubramaniam, the head of Department of Commerce and Management, for providing immense support and to make this workshop successful. Thank you, sir. I must thank the organizing team headed by Dr. Prashant AP and all the volunteers for working hard for the past few days to make this hands-on workshop more effective. My heartfelt thanks to all the faculties of commerce for their help and unstinted support for this workshop. I thank all the scholars and other participants offline and online from other university for making this study a resourcing success. Last but not the least, I thank my fellow scholars for the cooperation and making this workshop lively and interactive one. Once again, I thank you all for attending. Thank you so much. And we have a website for PhD. So please do have a look at it. And there is applications going on. And please visit our website for knowing more about the PhD programs going up to be conducted here. Thank you so much.